9 is probably my least favorite. It's really all about working with impoverished kids. You know, it's a passion of Dr. Rojas Cortez. One of the things, her assumption all along is that the family can't possibly survive without her, without the federal programs and stuff. And for the most part, they've had a positive impact. You and I don't really know this world, though, because we were raised by parents and our families were stable. But this chapter is really about that. Reality is still a fair number of you are going to work in low-income schools, so it might be very pertinent information here. So, Chapter 9 on the home-based programs.
Chapter 9 is on home-based school programs, and this is something near and dear to Dr. Rojas Cortez, in that it really is aimed at low-income, poverty kids. And that's why we're going to talk about a number of programs that you have never heard of, but I'll kind of help you line those up a little bit. Let's move on here. The overview here, home visiting, and I have shared before, I've done some of that. Talks about the successful programs that have been used, a day in the life, the learning activities, home activity things, establish home-based programs, the need, screening for better understanding. This is very interesting. This is new. It's so interesting that for a long time public schools ignored homeschooling, and now it's in such an epic proportion, such an explosion of it on the scene that they can no longer ignore it. I predict in the near future they will outlaw it and say it can't be done, but at this point, at least Dr. Rojas Cortez, surprisingly, is addressing it, what it's about and stuff. So there's a piece in here on that. And I'm sure you've never seen anything on homeschooling in any course that you've had yet. And so it's very interesting that they would bring that in here. And then this really deals with homework, supporting your children's learning at home. The origins of the home visiting came from Europe and England. Mostly England is where this came from. I think that's what I asked you on the test where it came from. Encouragement of Florence Nightingale to nurses on making home visits in rural areas. It's renewed after two, shifted from an individual focus to families in the 70s. Okay. So before we get into these programs, let me take you to the textbook. Let's see what we have here. So here's the home base, and this is the one that was on the PowerPoint. But this is, here's the one on the PowerPoint. This is a good one from 88. To work with a child and not with the parent is like working with only part of the pieces of a puzzle. Would be like a person who put a puzzle together with 1,000 pieces, and then as he finished, found the center part missing. And I've complained a number of times too. That's still one of my beefs, is there's not enough collaboration and stuff at home. Especially my elementary student, I think you never really know what's going on, what they're learning and stuff. But part of that could be my doings. So here is those same things. Okay, talks about this. The home is the primary children. Parents responsible for nurturing and educating their infants and preschoolers. And for the most part, we're letting parents abdicate that now with our preschool programs and stuff, that we quickly say, oh, the parents don't have the power or the skill to do that. I took that pretty seriously, as will you, but you'll work with a number of families if you teach impoverished areas that don't. Down here in this chapter, discussion will center on the first, the children and the home-based offerings that can support the family, and then the move towards homeschooling, which parents take responsibility for the children entirely. And what's funny about this is, in my opinion, these do not fit together. The homeschooling conversation does not fit with these home programs, but that's because I'm crabby and old. So origins of the home visits, said mostly from England. Assistance to the families was provided by friendly visitors, church members, other non-professionals. Now, I want you to know it doesn't say the government here. It doesn't say the government. Now it's the government. Government's the one that does this. Government being public schools. Nurse recognized for caring soldiers and those things. When immigrants in southern and eastern came in great numbers, visiting nurses along with settlement houses became part of that. and people just took care of each other. The government didn't do it. Now the government does everything. Okay. Focus on working with parents on couple relationships, father involvement. In other words, family things. Families aren't smart enough to figure things out themselves, so government will teach you how to work with each other. So here's what is the home-based education? Imagine yourself as the parent of two preschoolers living in the country, at least a mile from the nearest neighbor. Or pretend that you are a parent in a core city apartment house with no friends or family living close by. And what's interesting about that is I grew up in that environment that I'm not sure what the issue is here. Talks about immigrant families here and stuff, but nonetheless, it was decided that they need to reach out to those. So now we go into this programs at work, and this is what I'm going to ask you to just make yourself aware of each of these. First, the PAT, and lots of acronyms in this chapter. The PAT, Parents as Teachers. There's one here, and this is on the test about this baby face project relating to PAT. And that's what you want to make a little bit sure here. Which of these programs, like the PATs, was developed for districts in Missouri in the 1800s. Okay, here, in addition to school districts, PAT is offered by churches, hospitals, and social services as part of Head Start, Even Start, and Family Resource Centers. So PAT is offered in these programs. Okay, currently the PAT program is secured by $14.23 million grants, I-3 grants, a typical grant from the U.S. Department of Ed, which means you supply it. Thank you for doing that. Support this Babyface project, which provides home visits and family service to high-need Native American families and children. So the federal government says we're going to provide this program to come in and visit. PAT program services include 4 components: regularly scheduled visits, group meetings, monitoring their children's progress, and linking of families with community services. Okay. Then it describes those. As you can see, this is Dr. Rojas Cortez' first one. She likes government programs and that kind of government grant. Federal government gets involved. The federal government runs this. And it goes here and brags on the success of this program. This is interesting too. Beginning the third trimester of pregnancy and continuing into the child is 3, PAT home visits meet with each family to provide the following: information, guidance to the parents, information on child development, fostering things, developmental phases, prehistoric hearing. This is called Early Head Start, I believe. And this too was funded by the federal government. And how do you get in this program? It's strictly income based. You are not eligible for this program. Guidance, they have no preconceived ideas about their experience of rearing other children. Programs often for new parents, especially for those who do not work outside the home. And you do not have a need to visit and socialize with others. This helps them learn best to raise the child. And then there's several questions on the test about HIPPY, the Home Instruction Program for Preschool Youngsters. And so read through about that in the HIPPY, and I'll go back and show you this list of here's the PAT, here's the HIPPY. We'll talk about Healthy Families, Head Start, Nurse Family, Parent-Child Home, Portage Project, all there in the text about it. All right. And what I'm going to ask you to do on each of these is make a quick report about this. So here's our first inclusion in the notes. I don't need that one here. So we have this, our first thing, the notes, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them. So you address each of those as to what they are and give them something that you can use to study. Okay. Here's the Healthy Families, HFA. So maybe that'll help you remember some of these, but you make a quick report on each one of these, what there's about, so you can compare and contrast them. You want to make yourself a little cheat sheet for the test, because I guarantee you it's going to pick these apart in the test. Right, and then here's the Early Head Start. What is it? Federally funded means you. Thank you. Serves low-income pregnant women. This is the one I talked about before. This is the one for low-income pregnant women. It's desired to serve children until the age of their 3rd birthdays, and of course then they move to another program. They're not ever on their own. They're always government raising them. With the transition plans made to preschools, which are of course government federally run. What would we call that federally run one? Head Start. So from the Early Head Start to 3 to Head Start, and then into public education. Children participating in this live in poverty and have at least one of the disability indicators to qualify for this. And here it tells you what this is about: weekly home visits, screening of the children, those kinds of things. Programming that. Here's the next one, the Nurse Family Partnership Program. Takes you through that. Here's what the goals of this is. Is a home visiting program that serves who? Low-income first-time mothers. The goal of mothers improving their health and functioning. For the most part, we assume that these mothers can't possibly take care of their own health. The federal government comes in and says, we'll take care of your health. And so then they roll out this program. School dropout prevention, part of it. Stay in school. Okay. And then the Parent-Child Home Program, the PCHP, Home-Based Literacy Program, literacy that relies on positive verbal interaction between 2 and 4-year-olds. So following family home program. Who's it for? Low income. Federal government come in and raise these children here. Goal of the program is this: caregiver is an adult with primary nurturing responsibilities for the child. Goes through that. Right, and then, oh my gosh, there's a lot of things for that. What describes that program? And then the Portage Project, developed in '69, is a home-based family-centered demonstration program providing service to children with disabilities and their families. Model worked with children birth to 6 and their families through weekly home visits by the home teacher. The project originally covered 36,000 square miles in Wisconsin, and then it went farther. Adhered to the principle upon it was based. Here's these 4 principles of it. Work in collaboration with community agencies, comprehensive services, children, and families. Assessments. This is a play-based assessment. Home. You want to make sure you distinguish that. And lots of images here, so that's a pretty fast read. Talks about a checklist of 580 developmental sequence things. Of that one. This is part of it. The ecological planner. What that has to do with it. Nurturing journals, grow pack, interaction with daily routines. All part of that Portage, I believe. So, and that's what I'm going to ask you to do here, is come back and talk about all those. Right. So now a day in life. Yakima, I know that. Yakima, Washington. A lot of Native American base up there. No longer funded. You know why? In Yakima, they have gambling, and they're the richest Indian reservation in the country. And it's yet interesting how they still choose to put this program in, even though it's no longer funded. So in practice, that encourage a child's educational growth. Communication, reasoning, self-concept, nutrition, developmental activities, teaching techniques, play materials, Extending new expertise and knowledge about parenting to other members of the family. Okay, let's go back and see what that one is. Okay. Winning and play at the home base, and it's just a scenario here. The Rocca's house. Neat and attractive, modest by anyone's standards. Few all fall flowers brighten the graveled walk. But it's a story. How schools or centers can be used as home teaching centers. And again, we don't have that around here unless you're in a low-income area that you would assume the school would need to operate the family. But that's what this is based on. The emphasis was on practices that encourage children to learn communication skill, reason, develop concepts, things that are in your notes there. And this is interesting too, the comparison of home-based program descriptions. So I would certainly, in fact, I'm going to clip this and give you this to take with you. But this may help you for the test also. But it lays all these out, these home programs, for you. 5-step guide to learning activities. There's some questions on the test about these 5 steps, but here it is: idea, reason, action, extension. I forgot material. Let's look at that.
Here's these 5-step guides here. This is the Florida Parent Education Program, and here's the 5 things: idea, reason, material, action, extension. I say, and it talks about that in the textbook. Home activity files. Let me go back to the textbook first on this one. Development of home activities. The development of home activities depends the files on objectives, philosophy of that program, and it talked about all these programs back here. Down here throughout the year, home visitors involve parents in teaching their children at home. So you teach them to teach. Some visitors suggest activities for the child. There's some activities come into play, and it gives you some of these, I think, right here. Home visitors guide, and just kind of look at this. Some of these activities, discussion of growing a garden. It takes you through all the steps. So that's what they would leave them, is how to do some of these things that could be done easily and just interact with the kids. And it talks about these parent involvements during the home visits. Read together, publishing, arts and crafts. Just give suggestions. Again, you get a sense it's a preschool level stuff, but it's still interesting stuff. Play games together, backyard science. And maybe some of you will be involved with this someday, but this is how you would do it. You'd put this kind of a program together. And here's the activities away from home. You could take a walk, visit the library, visit a store, explore museums. All sounds like pretty good family type stuff that maybe we need some of that too. And home learner strategies for the home visitor talks about those things here. Alright, let's go back here then and see what this says. The skill that the child is or will be interested in, parent believes are relevant, required, suitable. And again, this comes from our federal government, tells us this. Activities you source at home like arts and crafts, reading, publishing, games, backyard science, front yard business, listening center, all kind of cool ideas. And here's the one from away from home. And this is on the next part of it, how to establish this home-based program. Include following to enable parents to become more effective teachers, support parents in roles of caregivers, strengthen parents' sense of autonomy, that they can do it, and self-esteem, reach child and family early in the child's formative years. And we've talked the programs all try and target that from conception, response to families' needs, and thus improve home environment. And isn't it interesting that this whole conversation is built on the assumption that the home environment isn't suitable? And if you have not ever been introduced to this world of impoverished home, and as I've shared with you many times, I taught in the middle school where 67% of the students got free reduced lunches. I got a first-hand look at this world, but this whole chapter really is built on the premise of families needing to be improved at home. And this term, this universal home visiting, that supportive families would be available to all, and in particular the universal access would not stigmatize the families most in need. That is a concern. 3 principles essential for home visit programs. Intervention should research-based identify the adverse outcomes to be addressed and factors necessary to change those outcomes. Intervention should be based on theories of behavior change. Intervention should be viewed as relevant and needed by that community. Let me take you back to the textbook. Here's those things for the home-based program. Determining, we're up to the needs here. How you can determine the need of children and families who become helped by an early intervention. Let me flip back over here. Children and families who could be helped by this program. What can the agency or the school do in the home visit program that cannot be accomplished through other programs? Could early intervention help children go to school? Are there children with disabilities? And this is a big one. This changes the rules if there's disabilities, especially if there's severe disabilities. Diagnosed and given service before they enter school. And, and all children are entitled to screenings prior to school. It was a kindergarten screening, but now children, even at age 3, can go through screenings to see if they have. And of course, what does it look like at age 3? Well, it's just developmental levels is what you're looking for. And that's a whole nother study, the early childhood special ed area. And will the program help eliminate later educational things? And that's how you justify all the funding and your money, your personal money that goes in here is that you try and strengthen their education later. And that's the only justification we have, trying to offset the cost to the public, for later on. After you try and reduce that chance of failure, school failure later on. So you start really at conception, right here, trying to eliminate this problem later on. Will the prevention of later educational problems reduce emotional problems, offsetting cost to public? Because that's what happens when kids fail. It turns into emotional problems. You realize the incidence of drug and alcohol abuse and tobacco use and abuse is so much higher in impoverished families? It comes down to this. Do you realize the percentage of incarceration and adjudication with the law is 10 times higher with kids that live in poverty than that don't? That's how you can justify spending this kind of money of your money on here. Other parents who could be helped by an adult literacy program. In other words, the parents that have literacy issues. Parents need support to develop self-sufficiency. What does that mean? What's self-sufficiency for the most part in the home? Do they work? Many do not, or certainly are underemployed. Or immigrant families in need of resources that will help them improve their quality of life, especially if they're new immigrants. And once you've established this need, then must determine is there a thorough assessment of needs, establish community interest. There are enough families in the community who are definitely interested and eligible for this. In other words, this really has to do with the size of your community. Do staff members already have skills and interests needed to work effectively with parents? Is it feasible to train staff? Can transportation needs be met? And of course, what does that mean? It's dramatically different in Madison, South Dakota than it would be in a more metro type place, bigger inner cities where there's public transportation. Will the program include family members who are away from home during the day? Who would that be? Somebody that goes to work. 4 components of effective homeschool: education, social services, health services, and parent involvement. Professional parent, teachers, paraprofessionals, or volunteers. 5 criteria commonly considered: age, experience, maturity, race, ethnicity, culture, and language. Not sure what this has to do with it. Professional education, gender, helping skills, those things. But if you're white, you're probably not eligible for this. Screening for better understanding. Let me just go back to the textbook again, if you would. Please, determining whether you need a need, and once you do, then how do you get going on the program? Involve others, recruitment of families into the, in other words, you're looking for those families, so you see if you have enough to start a program. Here's the thing on home visitors. I say, when I see that, I assume right away it's Dr. Rojas Cortez saying, oh, but if you're white, this is programs only for minority people, so that doesn't fit the white people. And then do you have good communication skills? And she lists this out here. Recruiting people to be visitors. Talks about in-serving training. Home visit. Are your home visits parent focused? Series of yes or no. Talks about small groups, community resources, program, parent questionnaires, all, trying to make a better program. And then screening for better understanding. Let me go back here. Examples of screening instruments: the Denver pre-screening development screening test, questionnaire, home questionnaires, those things. And what is the home inventory developed to get the picture of what child's world is like from his or her perspective? Inventories from 0 to 3 and 3 to 6 in elementary schools. Developed for 2 younger age groups to alleviate time requirement of home inventory. Before we get to homeschooling, I want to jump back here to the textbook one more time. Here's this home inventory analysis, home environment. You look through this and see what you think about, if you can read it here, what it is, really assess the parents and stuff. Here's the home screening questionnaire. And then we get into homeschooling. Saying what just blows me away that it's the first textbook of any kind I've seen that addresses homeschooling. And I said there's some talk of making this, that you can't do this, taking this right away, or at least you can't do it full time. And well, it's a long discussion, but there's some stuff behind it. Homeschooling may be defined as instruction and learning, at least some of which is through planned activity taking place primarily at home in a family setting with parent acting as a teacher or supervisor of the activity. Homeschooling is not new. Many of our nation's early leaders were taught at home. Imagine that. Imagine that. Many of our early leaders were taught at home. The common school movement began in the 30s and 40s, 1830 and 1840, but it was usual for children to attend for only 3 months out of the year for 3 or 4 years. The last half of the century saw a greater transformation of schooling. 86% of children 5 to 14 were attending public schools by 1890. Just a little history for you. During the 20th century, parents sent their children to public school and private schools, and schools became more and more centrally administrated, meaning community type administration. It doesn't mean federally like it is now. It wasn't until the 80s that the increase in homeschooling began to be noticed. Okay. Estimates of the number of children who were being schooled at home in the 70s range from 1,000 to 15,000 in the whole country. 83 estimates range from 60 to 125, but by 88, homeschool student body was thought to be 150 to 300. It increased rapidly in the 1990s. Estimates of homeschooled children ranged from 2 million up to 2 million. Okay, so we jumped from 88, 300,000 to 2 million, but 95% of confidence interval for the number of homeschoolers was 709, 982. What's interesting to me is why they can't be more specific on that. You would think they should be able to count them exactly. They still have to register that they're homeschooling kids. Every state has that. In other words, you cannot go off into isolation. You cannot move in a community and decide to homeschool your kids without registering with the school. I have not heard of a state that has that everybody has to say what's going on with them. So why this number is so hard to come up with is, I don't quite get it. And I would think Dr. Rojas Cortez could come up with that closer numbers than this. Subsequent data gathered have determined that homeschoolers account for 1.7% of the students in the United States. National Center of Education has anticipated that the number of children homeschooled will increase by 15% each year. The estimate of 1 million homeschooled students shows an increase of 1.7 since 1999 to 2.2, 1.5 million homeschooled in the United States. Report from the National Home Education Institute indicates 2.4 million students in 2010. So there, she has a little bit closer here. But why do you think that is? You stop this now and talk about this a little bit. Let me just run this up here. So you start to see this increase of epic proportions. Majority are white. Mothers usually acts as a teacher. Again, Dr. Cortez loves to point that out. Tests indicate most do well academically, and that's not true. They blow the competition away, and that's one of the things that bugs us in public education, is how these homeschool kids do so well in the state tests when they're educated in such an irregular setting. And it says states really regulate this differently. Three tops of this. Oh, okay. Three top reasons here, and this is her thinking: concerns about school environment, religious reasons, and dissatisfaction with the instruction offered. And here's where I want you to stop it, and this will be only our second input this chapter, is why do you think this explosion of homeschooling, when you see these reasons here, talk about it a little bit and highlight it for me, why you think there's an explosion of homeschooling. And you must, and if you would, please mention in here what you see in homeschooling. You must know somebody. I mean, it was a time nobody knew anybody was homeschooled. I have a brother and his wife that homeschooled. Our pastor had 5 children, homeschooled them all into college. We had close friends that had 5 children that homeschooled them all from beginning to end. Well, homeschool districts work with homeschooled children. They can offer additional services and resources to the family. And this is what the smart schools are doing, is trying to entice those children to come to school at least part of the day, just part of the day, and so that they can have some of the state reimbursement. Because when you think of these kind of numbers walking out the door of schools, that's some pretty significant dollars that are walking out with them. That's why a school district is so interested in working with these and getting in touch with them. They're not saying they need to become full-time, but they would sure like to have them at least part of the day so they can recoup some of the money that walks out the door. Here in South Dakota, it's nearly $5,000 per student, so my 2 nieces that are homeschooled would be another $10,000 to the Sioux Falls Public School if they're in public school. Now, let me tell you what I think of this. I think this is exactly the school environment, the families, the structures, the rules. Obviously, we've done everything we can to chase God and Jesus out of our schools, when most of our schools, if you understand the history of education, were built on biblical principles and the freedom of religion. And now, here we are a little over 200 years later, we have banned God and Jesus from being part of the schools and made it very difficult. And this one might be the biggest one, is people are just really shocked and dissatisfied with the approach that's taken, the liberal agenda, the very contrary approach to family values that are taught in our textbooks and stuff. And this is the people that I know. And our next door neighbor homeschooled their son for a few years. He was found to be dyslexic, and they just felt that school just would not address it, would not work with him. He didn't meet IEP, it didn't meet requirements to be on an IEP, and they just literally would not do much with him. Tell me the goods and bads. Well, obviously, one of the things that we tell each other in public education is, oh, those kids, they don't get any social interaction. I mentioned to you 5 different families. You can't deny, I mean, each one had some issues with that. These nieces of mine are so socially backward that at times it seems a little weird, but on the other hand, they don't have a constant exposure to some of the counterculture stuff that we don't want our kids exposed to, and that's what the parents are resting on. And of course, too, they are just so well educated. They read and function, and with these homeschool families, for the most part, too, there isn't a lot of screen time. There isn't a lot of internet. I shouldn't say not a lot of internet, not a lot of TV and downtime. There's a lot more reading and studying. I turned around on this. I said never, and the more I know people that were doing it, the more I would say have at it. I'm just going to say to you as future teachers, make sure you're willing to reach out and stuff because of the money that's walking out the door to these homeschool families. And what I think it does is allows the parents to teach values to kids rather than the school. And the school's values are going to be contrary to yours as family. And certainly the other thing that I'm finding with middle school, their friends start to raise them, that their friends teach them their values. And so that's what this is built on. Let me take you back to the textbook and see if I missed anything on the homeschooling movement. Here's the reasons for homeschooling. Give child a better education at home. And it has this: religious reasons, poor learning environment at school, family reasons, to develop character and morality. I say, and I would think this, the ones that I know too, or this was a bigger one. They wanted to develop those kids, emotionally and spiritually, not the school. Object to what school teaches, and this is getting to be, and this is the one too. I think you're going to see a lot of kids walking out the door because of this. School does not challenge child. Some of that. Other problems with available schools, student behavior problems at school. Yep. Unfortunately, we're seeing that, and this is where we make a case to end homeschooling because often the families can't handle them either. And this surprised me. It's this high. That's 8% as child needs disabilities. Then parent-school cooperation has to do with homeschooling here, and you can read through this scenario. And supporting children's learning at home, and again, to me, that isn't what that is, but quite a spiel here about that. Homeschool collaborations. Okay, how can parents help? Has some stuff here. I'm going to do this. I am going to ask you to put this together for homework help. So how can parents help? This will be helpful, especially if you're an elementary or special ed teacher. They have. I'm not going to clip this to you. I'm going to ask you to make a nice web page and reference this textbook. For homeworks, parents can help providing the following: set up a specific place to study. With this, set aside regular time, be supportive. These 7 points, you make a nice web page out of this. Let's find here. This is it, but you develop this more. This is our third thing. You make a nice web page out of this. And then link this in the notes. Make a link that takes me to that web page. Remember how to link? Don't lay in a URL here. Put a link in here. Let me show you what that looks like. For example, if I'm down here, I want to make a link here. You simply hyperlink it, and you do this whether it's in Word or what have you, and you drop the URL in there. Last time I asked this, I had a number of you that just laid URLs on here, and for the icebreaker one, and I don't want a URL here. I want this to be linked in here, so I can just click on that link. All right. I want to take another look at this. Assign homework that reinforces, enriches. Yeah, this is for you as homework, and this is also a pretty heads-up thing too about homework. Assign homework that reinforces and enriches that was learned in class, and not especially elementary kids, it's not a good place to try and force new learning. That the homework should always be something that reinforces what's been taught, that they practice it, that it's meaningful. And you want to explain it. And this is where, too, with technology, you can literally do oral explanations or videos on how to do different things or what the homework is. To just list this page or something may not be sufficient. And there's enough technology now, you can very quickly make tutorials on your web page of how to do different things. Use homework forms, grade it, communicate with the parents, explain process, respond, and teach study skills. Teach students how to do it, how to get ready. I say then this is your third one. So you only have 3 this time, things to address in your notes. Here, like rules and regulations, homework, do you take off points for late? Is homework graded? Figure this. Let me do this. I'm going to ask you to make some notes on this, about this for each one of those. This will be our 3rd, and this one here will be our 4th. Okay, come back here and make a note about each of these, because the textbook does a pretty nice job of giving you some information on those things. All right. Teach study skills. Look that up. Okay. All right. Let's see if there's anything else behind here. This is interesting too, and the textbook has some websites. I thought I'd be able to click on them here, but I can't. So that's Chapter 9, Homeschool Programs.